Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 22nd of September 2021. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, a bit of regulation news overnight. There was a kind of meeting with, I can't remember who it was with, but Gary Gensler, the SEC chairman, was meeting with someone else, I think in Washington, or some group of people, talking about crypto regulations, doing kind of like a live stream around it, and he mostly reiterated a lot of the points that he'd already gone through, such as he expects more regulation to come from the SEC, he expects companies to fall in line, he expects to put like a whole framework around crypto and regulate it from that framework. So definitely not being shy about the fact that more regulation is coming. But then, while I was kind of like, I wasn't watching this because I was in bed, but I was kind of lying there scrolling through Twitter, seeing all the quotes and stuff like that of what he was saying. And I kind of thought to myself, well, Ethereum is being built to withstand Gary Gensler's bullshit, and not just him, but like all the regulators around the world. So let's just keep building, right? Let's keep building these better systems. Let's keep building systems that are more decentralized than what they are today. I'm not just talking about the smart contracts or anything like that. I'm talking about decentralizing the entire stack. So things like the team, right? Let's make sure the team's distributed. Let's make sure it's very hard to prosecute all the team at once. So there's no central points of failure within the team. Let's make sure that the supporting infrastructure is decentralized. Let's not just rely on centralized providers like Infura and Alchemy and things like that. They're good, don't get me wrong, but let's kind of like try to decentralize that out. Obviously, like the smart contracts, right? We want to decentralize that as well. And the front ends too is a very important point too. So we just need to keep doing that because we can fight them in their own home turf. Like we can bribe politicians, lobby politicians with kind of money there to get them on side. We can call our representatives, not my representatives, but people in the US can call their representatives, stuff like that. We can try to educate them, whatever. But really, when we're doing that, we're fighting them in their arena. And this is not something that we shouldn't be doing. We should definitely be doing that. But I think that the better use of a lot of our time is just building better, more decentralized systems so that, in the worst case, if these regulators come after the apps and things like that, they can really only choke the centralized kind of points of failure. And I've spoken about this before, but the two largest centralized points of failure within the crypto ecosystem right now are the centralized exchanges and the stablecoins. So it's very, very hard to decentralize the main function of a centralized exchange, which is being a fiat on and off ramp. There's been attempts at this, such as local Bitcoins, but they actually ended up having to implement KYC. So if you wanted to do a truly decentralized kind of like I guess peer-to-peer trading of or peer-to-peer on and off ramps, it'd be very hard. It'd also be probably rife with scamming. I just don't see it as something that we're going to be able to do anytime soon. There are limited ways that we can do it. There are some ways around it, but I don't see us doing it in a scalable way for quite a while. Now, when it comes to stablecoins, obviously the ecosystem is very reliant on things like USDC, USDT, and some other centralized stablecoins like BUSD. And they're not necessarily bad. They're actually good. They do what they're supposed to do from that perspective, but they're not decentralized. So they're very, very easy for regulators to target. So there are plenty of projects working on decentralized stablecoins. I've mentioned them on the refuel before. I'm not going to go through the whole list again. And they're trying to achieve that holy grail that I've spoken about before, which is being a scalable, stable, and decentralized stablecoin. Lots of experiments running in parallel there. I think we're going to have a much easier time doing, decentralizing this, creating a truly decentralized stablecoin than we are trying to create decentralized fiat on and off ramps. It's just not going to work out there. But in saying that, the exchanges, especially the ones based in the US, such as Coinbase, Gemini, Kraken, they're going to be fighting any kind of like really stiff regulations, such as, for example, what if the SEC or any other kind of regulator in the US says, well, Coinbase, you can't allow users to withdraw their kind of like funds to their own wallet anymore. They have to kind of, or if you want to do that, they have to kind of like go through all these hoops and like verify their address and everything like that and tie their identity to it and stuff like that. So there's that aspect to it. But, in that kind of world, that's like the kind of like worst case world where they choke all those points, we need to make sure that they can't choke the actual, layer ones, layer twos, DeFi apps, supporting infrastructure, all that sort of stuff. We need to decentralize all of that as much as possible. And I think, the lowest hanging fruit for The apps themselves is probably the front ends, I would say. The front ends we've seen, Uniswap Labs made a move where they actually censored some tokens on their own centralized front end. So I think they're going to go after those sorts of things. But it's very, very, very easy for anyone to spin a front end up for these kind of like apps, as long as the smart contracts are decentralized and you can't have, I guess, like censorship on the smart contract level, and you can't have kind of like centralized controls there and things like that. But setting up a front end that kind of like, I mean, there's plenty of front ends. There's one project that I really like called Liquidity that's actually been doing this, where they basically encouraged people to run their own front ends or build their own front ends. They didn't actually offer an official one. So they just offered the smart contracts, and then they have links to all the other ones out there right now. So we need more of that, much more of that. And, it's not good enough for us to just be relying on the quote unquote official front ends for a lot of these things. I know it's easier. I know they're really nice, but we need to kind of like decentralize and distribute that out from that perspective, of course. And then I said today, I've been speaking to a fair few teams lately, and many of the US-based crypto teams that I know are now bringing forward their plans to decentralize because of Gensler's comments. And by this, I mean that they may be centralized today, or they may be kind of like an early stage where essentially they've started as a centralized company, they're building something, but they've brought forward their plans to issue a token and become a DAO because of all of these, Gensler's comments and the SEC's kind of like attitude towards crypto in general over the last few weeks and months. So that's actually a pretty good byproduct of this. It means that teams are going to decentralize faster, at least from that perspective. But as I said, we still need to decentralize across the entire stack. It can't just be, create a DAO, put a token on it, do token holder voting, and throw our arms up in the air and, say, job well done. It's not going to work. We need to do everything across the entire stack. And I'm hoping to see more teams take that on board, and more teams kind of like focus on that. All right, so Argent, I got a few layer 2 updates actually today for you guys, so this is exciting. But Argent put out a little blog post here explaining what is zkSync. So for those who remember, I've talked about Argent and their layer 2 plans before. They're actually going to be working with zkSync first and adding others later. But in this kind of like short blog post here, they're describing what zkSync is, what the benefits are, how does it all work, what's a roll-up, and then links to further resources. So I just wanted to highlight this because I thought it was a great post, so definitely go check this out. It'll be linked in the YouTube description. Bartek is back here with another one of his great threads about layer 2s, and this one's about how censorship resistance with regards to layer 2. So in this thread, Bartek explains how important it is, and how different applications or different L2s can essentially censor individual users, but also how users can prevent not prevent this censorship from happening, but basically exit the system once it does happen, or if they kind of experience it happening at kind of some sort of scale here. So it's a short little thread, about 7 or 8 tweets here, but I thought it was just very informative. Bartek's done a few of these now. He actually, I'm pretty sure, works on L2 Beat with the rest with a few other people here, helps them on that site. As I mentioned before, L2 Beat is one of my favorite websites within the crypto ecosystem right now for, tracking layer 2 growth, but not only tracking layer 2 growth, being able to kind of track the risks associated with each layer 2 and all of kind of like, I guess, information about how they work, and links to resources about the project, all that sort of stuff. I just think it's really cool. So definitely check out this thread from Bartek. Nethermind here put out a blog post talking about solidity on Starknet and reaching terminal velocity here. So I've spoken about this before, about how the Nethermind Warp team released their demo for transpiling an ERC20 solidity contract to Cairo and deploying it to Starknet. So I spoke about this a few weeks ago, but essentially, just a quick refresher for people who may not be aware. Starknet is not EVM compatible, and it's not using kind of Solidity natively. It's running on their own kind of virtual machine, and they're running their own programming language called Cairo. Now, what this transpiler does is it allows for Solidity contracts to be ported over and to be transpiled so that they run on Starknet. Now, Starknet has a few different things that are going to be running on it. Obviously, there's StarkX today, and that's going to be kind of like folded into Starknet, I'm pretty sure. And these are the projects like that we all know and love, like DYDX and other sorts, and Diversify and Immutable X and things like that. There's like a mix there between Validiums and ZK rollups as well. But this post gives a bit more detail about how they did it, from a technical level. So if you're technical and you're a developer and you want to check this out, I definitely recommend giving it a read. But this sort of stuff's really cool. As I've said before, layer 2s give us the ability to be super expressive. We're not limited by the EVM. We're not limited by Solidity. You can basically build anything you want as a layer 2. And I've spoken about it before, and it's actually a perfect segue into Polynya's tweet here, where he put out another great tweet today where he said, L1s will be technologically obsolete in the modular era. They have 3 options. Become an execution layer, such as SoRare or Arbitrum. So execution layer, I've spoken about before, about how you can have these layer 2s executing the transactions and only settling that kind of like a proof or the data of that those transactions onto layer 1 Ethereum. They can become a security layer, such as Ethereum, which is often combined with a data availability layer. For example, Polygon Avail, there's Celestia, and there's a couple others out there as well. But essentially, this is just what I was talking about, I guess. I've been talking about this a lot lately, but essentially splitting up the, security data availability layer and execution layer. So Ethereum has the security layer, obviously. The data availability, it has it right now, but in a very limited fashion. Once we have sharding introduced in kind of like the protocol there, it'll be much, much better, because sharding will basically allow for more data availability. But it's not just going to be Ethereum, it's going to be stuff like Polygon Avail and Celestia. But this is the kind of modular blockchain era, as Polynya likes to call it, and I think that's a great way to put it. And he ends this tweet by saying, L1s must focus. And I was actually talking about this in the Daily Gwei chat we were having tonight, in the voice channel, in the Discord channel, and I was saying that I think that we've spent all this time doing research and development, and I think we're finally at the point where we know how to scale blockchains, and these kind of like monolithic L1s that are going in the opposite direction, such as Solana, are going to be obsoleted, and I think that the new competition is going to be in being a layer 2 on Ethereum, being this execution layer and just tapping into other security and data availability layers like Ethereum, Polygon Avail, and such. Now, what this means is that you're going to see, I think, a lot less layer 1s launch and a lot more layer 2s launch. And especially when these layer 2s issue their own token and the valuations are pretty kind of like sky high, because they will be, to be honest. I mean, there's so much hype around these things for good reason, of course. But you're going to see that people are going to be like, oh, well, let's just become a layer 2 on Ethereum, because you can still have your own token. It can still be a staking token. But it just cements ETH as kind of like this security, data availability, settlement layer. And then it uses ETH within the system, within the layer 2 for, they may choose to use it for fees. That's kind of like the path of least resistance. I think they will. And then they can kind of just like focus on driving value to their token in other ways, whether that be as a staking token, as a governance token. Maybe they burn some of the token based on fee revenue and things like that. Still taking ETH as fee revenue, but maybe they sell the ETH or trade that ETH for their own token, or like do a burn that way as well. So there's a lot of different things you can do there, of course. And they can, that's how they decentralize as well, these layer 2s. So I really do think and completely agree with Polynya that over the coming years, we're going to see layer 1, like monolithic L1s, become obsolete. There's going to be way less focus on layer 1s, and the focus is going to shift to layer 2s. And we may see some newer layer 1s come online, but as data availability layers only. They won't be doing execution. So when I talk about like more layer 2s coming online, they're purely going to be kind of like these execution things. From what I can tell, it doesn't make any sense for, I guess, like a layer 2 to be a data availability layer, because that's just not how it works, from my understanding. But maybe it does work like that in the future. And this is another thing that I've been thinking about as well, is that we don't want to fall into any form of like maximalism when it comes to this kind of technology. Obviously, scaling has evolved a lot over the years. We started off with state channels, then we evolved into plasma and all of its flavors. Now we've come to rollups and all of its flavors, and we have validiums and volitions, which are like kind of like hybrids and things like that. And we don't know what we're going to have in the future. So there's no point being kind of like a roll-up maximalist, for example. I know I talk about roll-ups a lot, and I know I talk about them being kind of like this holy grail for scaling. But what I really mean is that the holy grail for scaling is everyone kind of like realizing that L1 blockchains work best as a security, data availability, kind of like settlement layer, and L2s built on top is where all the execution should happen. It doesn't matter if the L2 is a roll-up. It doesn't matter if it's a validium, volition, plasma, whatever works and whatever works best should be used. And the funny thing is, like, the cryptography that goes into this sort of stuff is different based on which L2 you're using and building, and there's kind of like trade-offs when it comes to each of them, but it's just going to keep getting better and better. And it's actually a great discussion from that Mahalo highlighted here from Jordi Baylina, who's part of the Hermes team, or I think the founder of Hermes, which is obviously now acquired by Polygon, where he basically was talking to someone from from Aztec Protocol, Zachary Williamson, one of the co-founders of Aztec Protocol, about different kind of cryptography primitives and how they all work, Starks, Snarks, Plonks, or P lookups, Groth16, all these sort of, I mean, this is super, super technical cryptography stuff. If you don't know any of those words, don't worry, neither do I. I mean, I know the words, I don't know what they mean. I don't know cryptography. But this is what I mean by the fact that this space is still evolving so very, very quickly. And this is exactly why teams like Polygon have committed $1 billion to zero knowledge research, because we know that zero knowledge kind of like technology is the kind of where we want to be in the long term, is going to be the best solution, but there's many solutions within that, and we don't want to get stuck on one and just like kind of settle for it. We want to keep pushing the boundary here, just like we do with any technology. So and obviously Polygon isn't the only one putting resources towards here. And if you think that Optimism and Arbitrum are basically saying, I'm sitting idly by and saying, oh well, we're just going to let zk rollups eat our lunch as optimistic rollups, that's not true at all. And I think optimistic rollups still have their place, but Arbitrum and Optimism are definitely going to have research and development into zk rollups as well, and all the zero knowledge stuff and things like that. So it doesn't pay to be a rollup maximalist. It doesn't pay to be an anything maximalist. It pays to be a decentralization maximalist, of course, because that's what we all know and love. And if you want to call me an Ethereum maximalist, whatever, that's fine. I think it pays to just pay attention to, I guess, like what technology is working, what the best design is going forward, and leave your biases at the door. The funny thing is that Ethereum and Bitcoin are the only, in my view, Ethereum and Bitcoin are the only truly decentralized and secure kind of like security settlement layers right now. But there could be more in the future. But the thing is that Bitcoin doesn't support kind of like any kind of like expressivity at layer one. You can't settle or you can't post batches and proofs to layer one Bitcoin from layer two. So that's why Bitcoin's very limited in what it can do with layer two with regards to the Lightning Network through kind of a state channel kind of construction there, and a few other little things. They heavily rely on side chains, the Bitcoin ecosystem, whereas Ethereum is materially different because it can, we have the EVM and everything like that. We have the expressivity, so we can settle those batches and proofs on layer one to have a really, really vibrant layer two ecosystem. So from where I'm sitting, Ethereum is the only truly decentralized and secure settlement layer for layer twos that we have today, and it's going to be like that for the foreseeable future. I don't see anything coming close to Ethereum in that regard. So as I said before, the other blockchains are competing with layer 2 Ethereum. They are not competing with layer 1 Ethereum because they've already lost, and they pretty much have no hope of matching Ethereum's decentralization and security. I mean, I know that might be too early to say for some people, but I really don't believe they have any hope of catching Ethereum. And honestly, I don't really believe they have any hope of catching Ethereum's L2 ecosystem, which is already bigger than most of these other L1s, and they don't have token incentives. There are no native token incentives on Arbitrum or Optimism. There's no Arbitrum token, there's no Optimism token. Yes, there's token incentives from other projects, but that's fine. That's always going to happen. These other ecosystems that these other layer 1 blockchains that have seen some growth lately, they have massive token incentives, and I'm pretty sure that when they run out, most of the liquidity is going to leave, and it's probably going to go into L2s on Ethereum, to be honest. So yeah, I know that might be a maximalist view to some, but that's just my view, and that's just how I see things. And I'm looking at it from kind of, I guess, like an objective point of view where you can objectively measure a lot of this stuff, and you can kind of like see that this is the path forward and this is the best path forward. And there's no use getting hung up on the subjective arguments about, we have to have like we have to embrace every chain, we have to embrace everything, blah, blah, blah. I don't believe that. I believe that we should embrace what works, what's actually legit. I believe that there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work and there's a lot of stuff that isn't legit. I believe a lot of technology being built today in the blockchain crypto space is very misguided. So I'm just not going to support that at the end of the day. But I will support the kind of like ecosystem on Ethereum that's building out with the layer 2s, because that's what I truly believe is the path forward. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that and talk about new Arbitrum bridge interface, which went live today. This has been the main pain point, I think, for a lot of people. Remember the Arbitrum, if you saw the old Arbitrum bridge interface, it looked really bad. It was basically hardly any styling. It looked like a scam website, and now you can see that they've updated it and it looks awesome. I mean, it looks like a normal interface you'll see on something like Uniswap, which just basically put in how much you on layer 1 that you want to put into layer 2, and then click the deposit button, and choose the token that you're depositing, and away you go. So yeah, very, very easy, very, very nice little bridge portal here, bridge interface here. If you haven't kind of like bridged into Arbitrum yet, I mean, I suggest you do so. Go enjoy some Arbitrum stuff. I've been playing around with it, on a bunch of different addresses that I have for various different things. It's just so awesome to be able to like do a trade for much lower fees than layer 1, and also have like an instant confirmation of the transaction. Obviously, it's not instant finality as I've explained before, but the confirmation just being instant to the user on the UI UX side is just a pleasant experience. Much better experience than basically, waiting for a block to be mined for 15 or so seconds, and then if you haven't set, even in a 1559 world, if you haven't set like your gas fee kind of high enough and the gas fee spikes, then obviously, it's going to be a bit of a delay there, but still, even in a 1559 world where most of the time you'll get your transaction in within one block, 15 seconds, 10, 15 seconds, whatever one block is. I mean, depending on when you've done your transaction as well. But let's just say on average, it's like a 10-second wait time. I mean, that doesn't even come into the same kind of reality of competition as these layer 2s that give you instant confirmation. Now, I know that there's a major difference there because on layer 1, you basically get like instant finality because it's settled on layer 1, but obviously you have to wait for that to happen, and you have to pay for that too. Whereas on layer 2, you may get it within a couple of minutes, this kind of like instant, this finality, but you'll still get that instant kind of confirmation of your transaction, which is just a much better overall user experience, I believe. All right, so Uniswap has published their Uniswap product update number 2 here, going over basically the layer 2 beta with improved user experience. As you guys know, that Uniswap is currently on Optimism and Arbitrum. They've got updates of their developer guides, help center, EIP 1559 support, and ENS on their Sybil kind of platform, which is like a governance platform that they're using, I believe. So if you want to catch up on all the latest Uniswap updates, be sure to check out this blog post. It's got details about all of it on there. This is an interesting thread from Michael Sproul here, who's working at Sigma Prime, one of the teams building an Eth2 client called Lighthouse, and he's showing an estimate of client diversity for the Eth2 mainnet derived from block proposal data. And he's got a thread about how accurate this is. He basically says like it should be pretty accurate, but obviously it's not at 100%. But what's really awesome to see and what I wanted to focus on was that I think a couple months ago, Prism was like over 70% of the network. Now it's only 64.8%. So it's getting better here. Lighthouse has a healthy 21.9% share, and then the minority clients, Teku and Nimbus, have the rest of it. Now you can see here that in the kind of like orange color, Teku or Nimbus accounts for 8.6%. Michael mentions that he wasn't able to discern if these clients were Teku or Nimbus, but he was able to discern that 4.7% were Teku. So I think the main thing to look at here is just Prism. Like, we want Prism to ideally stay below 2/3 of the total kind of like network, and they currently are. That's 66%. So we want them to be 66% or less of the client share here, for kind of, I guess, like beacon chain health reasons, but also for kind of I guess like liveness reasons as well, because we want to be able to keep the chain running. We want to be able to keep the chain finalizing and justifying, even if the Prism nodes go offline, which they have before on the test nets, and I think on mainnet there was an incident as well, if I remember correctly here. But ideally, as I said before, we want no client having more than kind of like 50%. So if we can get Prism down to 50% or less, that'd be awesome. And in an ideal world, we would have like 25%, 25%, 25%, 25% right across these 4 clients. There's actually a 5th client, Lodestar, that recently went live as well. But I don't think we're going to get there. I think we can get to a point where 50% is Prism, maybe 30% is Lighthouse, and then the remaining 20% becomes Teku, Nimbus, and maybe Lodestar in there as well, which is very, very healthy. So if you're running Prism, consider switching. I know that switching can sometimes be scary because of the fact that you don't want to get slashed, and it's scary kind of like changing things and messing around with validators. I understand that, totally get that, but there are resources to help you out there. The ETHStaker Discord is a great resource as well, and as far as I know, all of these clients support Windows too. So if you're a Windows staker like I am, you can definitely run these other clients on Windows instead of running Prism. Prism here for your validators. So if you are running Prism, consider switching off. Not because Prism is a bad client, just because it kind of like helps the client diversity and helps the security and health of the beacon chain at the end of the day. But yeah, this thread will be linked in the YouTube description. You can go check it out from Michael. It gives a great little breakdown here of how he came to the conclusions. And I really, really like that he did this, because this is definitely important as we get closer to the merge. So Gavin Andresen posted an interesting blog post today, and this wasn't about Ethereum per se, but the blog post is titled "A Possible BTC Future," and it's very short. It basically talks about and posits that Bitcoin's future is essentially the Bitcoin network dying off because of the fact that it can't secure itself. As I've described this notion before, where the Bitcoin block rewards become so small, the Bitcoin network isn't able to secure itself via fee revenue alone. And at some point in the future, the chain just basically grinds to a halt because no one wants to mine it, or it gets attacked constantly, and the Bitcoin blockchain just becomes this kind of like dead thing. And what Gavin basically says is that he thinks that BTC will end up migrating to some other network where it'll be burnt on the Bitcoin blockchain and then issued on another blockchain, or it might live on multiple blockchains or multiple different kind of like chains, even layer 1s or layer 2s, but the BTC kind of like supply would always be fixed. Now, for those who don't know who Gavin is, he doesn't really kind of like pop around much these days, but he was a very early contributor to the Bitcoin Core software, and eventually depending on who you talk to, he either kind of got pushed out of Bitcoin Core development, or he kind of like left himself. But from what I can tell, it seems that he got pushed out of core development. So that was sad back then, but he was very early. Like I'm talking, I think Satoshi, if I'm remembering correctly, Satoshi actually gave the reins over to Gavin for Bitcoin when Satoshi disappeared in, I can't remember the exact year, but it was early on, obviously. So, when he speaks, I listen. Like, he's definitely a person that I respect within this industry, has a lot of great thoughts. He hasn't just blogged about this, he's blogged about a bunch of other things, but it's great to see him thinking about this in the same way that myself and a few other people have thought about this in the past. Like, I've constantly gone on about the fact that I think that the Bitcoin network will not be able to secure itself in the future once the block reward gets too small, and it's not in the far future anyway. I mean, Gavin says in the far future, like 2061 and the year 2100, but I actually think it's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years. I don't think we're going to have to wait that long. So yeah, we'll see how that kind of shakes out there. But this is a nice little blog post. I'll link it in the YouTube description. It's very, very short. I mean, you can see here that it's super, super short, so you'll be able to read it there. But yeah, it's good to see Gavin still blogging, still kind of like putting forward these ideas, because he's got a nice different reach to what I have and what other people in the ecosystem have. So yeah, great to see him putting this out there. But I think on that note, that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.